Good on you, cousin. You've found the Gorgon Posse podcast of Medusa Rising. I'm Esme Strakelt, founder and editor of this joint, and we seek to deepen support and coalition among feminists globally and to publish new writing and media by women everywhere on Gaia's thrumming earth. You can find all of our world building at medusarising.org. You can also find us on Substack. Please share, download, share. We feminists must be our own algorithm. That is the postmodern magic. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Gorgon Posse podcast. My name is Victoria Gugenheim and I am a Gorgon here at Medusa Rising. With me is the fabulous Jaclyn, who is an embodiment author, coach and editor. And today we'll be talking about embodiment as part of our embodiment series. Welcome, Jaclyn. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I started out as an author. I mean, really, when I finally kind of grew up enough to understand what I really wanted to do. And it evolved into realizing that, my work is really mostly with women. And the work that I was doing with women was mostly about reorienting toward themselves, their real self, and decentralizing men and relationships. And so I just sort of, rode that wave and continued forward with what has become embodiment coaching and a lot of, written work in that same theme.
That sounds incredible. So can you tell us a bit more about some of the work that you've done, kind of the personal transformations that you've had on your journey?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of launched into this by a death experience. I was thrown from the back of a motorcycle and into the side of the truck. Yeah. And then it ran over me and I died a couple of times and broke most of the bones in my body. And it was just the whole thing. But when I came out of that experience, I just had this like really heavy sadness that I had to live. And in exploring that, because of course that's not the way a person wants to wander through the world, I realized that in large part, I was so reticent to survive because I was living a life that had been sort of dictated to me, subvertedly under the radar, whatever, very, very covertly. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't who I really was. It wasn't who I wanted to be. It wasn't anything that aligned with the kind of person that I had wanted to be. And so I finally gave myself permission to who would I be if I didn't have to fill these obligatory roles or titles in other people's lives and in the world? So I started by writing a book. And then after I published the book, I kind of floundered around for a while. And I don't mean like directionless, but just, I didn't know how. I wanted to keep talking about this message of really connecting to who we are outside of the labels that are sort of applied to us by the outside world. And I wasn't really sure how to approach that. And it just became a thing where, people began reaching out to me and asking, I'm doing this thing. I don't know if I don't like it because I don't like it. I don't know if I don't like it because there's something, wrong with the system or something. And it evolved into this sort of like one-on-one coaching, who are you really? Who do you really want to be? And would that person make this decision? How does that person feel about this shift in your life or whatever?
Wow. It sounds like you've had the ultimate wake-up call. That's incredible.
I mean, a couple of them, actually. Yeah.
Oh my, I don't even know what to say. I mean, if you ever needed the most visceral way of going, actually, this is the way you should be living your life. I mean, I don't think you could ask for anything more immediate.
Yeah, God. It was absolutely the epitome of being slapped across the body, not even the face.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you really doing here, girl?
Oh my God. Yeah. But it sounds like an amazing transformation. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot of women out there that, and especially kind of the listeners as well here, I think a lot of women really do struggle with embodiment. And that's why we're kind of, doing this series, because You're totally right in terms of the systemic condition to wake up from that. How deep is the conditioning? I mean, my God.
Yes, exactly. You know, well, and even post an experience of that magnitude, years and years, decades after that, working through this and having such a consciousness and intention to identify and align with who I really was and what I really wanted, I continue to see the layers of the ways that, oh, I didn't even realize that that was something that patriarchy or men or religion told me I should be, or how I should be in the world, or what I should be doing. It's like it's a never ending onion. It just, the more you peel back, the more there is. It's incredible.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, it's the onion of fuckery. So I do swear a bit, is that the world isn't made for a great majority of people. It's, first of all, I think evolutionarily, you're the least worst you need to be in order to survive. And secondly, it's true. It's like, and then also, you know, you've got this, you know, essentially you've got a predator class really that's running everything. And that kind of, you know, that's the CEOs, that's the politicians, that's like the Epstein lot, who are just orienting the world and shaping the culture to their, basically to their needs and to their needs and their benefits. And this is also why I think doing the counterculture stuff is just so important. And I think that's also why, especially in my life, I've been so drawn towards kind of countercultural stuff, because I've always been interested in kind of, you know, alternative artwork, alternative ways of being, you know, different subcultures, you know, always into kind of the alternative stuff, like, you know, whether it's kind of punk, whether it's goth, whether it's kind of new wave, new romantic stuff. You know, I like looking at kind of, for some reason, I'm really drawn to 80s stuff for some reason. And I just think there was just something so, like, especially with really kind of beautiful about it, because they weren't afraid of really kind of strong aesthetics. And at the same time, it was a mixture of rebellious. And then there was also color, joy, and life, especially with the new romantics and early goths. And also, especially in the late 90s with the cybergoth stuff. Of course, you can say there's kind of problematic stuff in the scene, but at the same time, there's always this like other alternative way of being, which doesn't have to be part of the mainstream. And I think, you know, it shows you how much society doesn't really gear towards people if there's so many people splintering off and making their own stuff. It's kind of a no-brainer, especially for women, when you must either be, you know, like, 'cause we've got this whole idea of maiden, mother, crone, right? And that's also in feminism as well as patriarchy. However, there was another stage in a woman's life called a maven. So it was maiden, mother, maven, crone. And the maven, so there's a festival in the UK, and the woman, Rebecca Morden, she goes across the world with her cabaret stuff, and she's a rad femme cabaret person, brilliant woman. And she runs Maven Festival because the Maven is when she's entering the last phase of her, you know, life, going from mother to cronehood. So this transitional phase. And the idea is that she's meant to take young lovers, she's meant to party, she's meant to enjoy herself, she's meant to be sexually free. And I'm like, oh, that's convenient that the woman totally forgotten that a woman was meant to party for a decade before she settled down.
Well, and not to mention, not only forgotten and glossed over, but shamed that window of life. God. You know, like, if you are a doting grandmother or a productive, you know, 40 or younger woman, you're just sort of worthless. Like, your career is coming to an end, your body's, you know, reached its useful or limited usefulness, whatever. And in fact, I'm actually living in that window and doing exactly that. I have a really young lover that I absolutely adore, wildly outside the box. I have never been happier or more free.
Oh, this is congratulations.
Yes, this is the time. This is the time to love our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And like, well, that just sounds like you're deep in your mavenhood. That's wonderful. And
yeah, I guess I am.
Yeah, you are. It's like, and the thing is as well, like, I keep thinking about this, where it always is just, again, going down to this extractive property of like, oh, what can we get out of a woman in terms of patriarchal society, rather than what can society do for 51% of the population.
Yes.
You know,
yes. I agree.
And even when it's meant to be quote unquote me time, the me time is always kind of beautification or adornment. So like spa days and things like that. I'm sure a number of women will find spa days really restorative, but there's always something in there that's to do with, you know, enhancing beauty rather than it being just for health, for example. And there's always this overarching element of you have to be an adornment for somebody rather than being self-adorned or doing something that you personally want to do. And it's like, it's in every single element of the culture, rather than us being, autonomously driven individuals or part of a collective that actually nurtures us,
Yeah, I do. Well, and I've worked a lot with people around the idea of intention in those things specifically, because there obviously, as you have mentioned, there is an element of conditioning that's been built into things like going to get a massage or something like that. But there's also a very fine line where that allowing that, making space for that truth is also sort of disempowering women from the connection that they are allowed to have with the power of their beauty, and not power over others because they're beautiful, but just the power in feeling beautiful. And of course that's all grossly wound in with what beauty is defined as and by whom and for her. But I think that, paring it down to intention is a way forward for all of us to kind of like parse out, is this because it makes me feel beautiful? Is this because I step out of here feeling like a radiant goddess that deserves to be worshipped and honored? Or is this because I feel like the people outside in the world around me are going to see me as a version of beautiful that they will like? And I think that there's,
Go on, sorry, please.
Well, it's just a lot of nuance in that, it's a hard, process, but I think it could be useful. I think it can be a useful one.
I think you're right. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because we were talking a little bit on those lines in the previous podcast I just did with Esme. And this also was part of Women Create, the first Women Create that I did. So I did the Women Create Festival, and it was for cancelled, censored and at-risk female and feminist artists, activists and creatives from across the political spectrum, grounded in women's liberation. We've got another one coming up in 2027. Really excited. Please come along. I would love you there.
Yes.
We did a thing about please come along. We did this thing about kind of aesthetic adornment, social policing within kind of radical feminist circles and how it alienates women. And, essentially talking about kind of like the politics of aesthetics and personal adornment, and also how you can find autonomy, and that actually doing something to adorn yourself doesn't mean at all that you want to have, some kind of patriarchal idea of a beauty standard. Right. And also, say if you think your boobs are looking good one day and you want to show them off, it doesn't mean you're doing it for the service of men. You can be like, wow, my boobs look amazing, I'm going for a walk. And from kind of my kind of side of as a detransitioner, I was going to have my breasts cut off. So if I'm having so I was looking at the surgeon who was going to have them removed. I was about probably an hour away from popping up the crowdfunder, because it was going to cost me about £14,000.
Wow.
And so I really wanted to be just smooth, straight up and down. And the very fact now I'm going, actually, my boobs look incredible today, I'm going to take the twins for a walk. To me, you know what I mean? Every woman is going to have, like, whether we've got patriarchal trends, beauty trends, and so on, every single woman is also going to have this personal journey of what's actually going to be empowering to her. And of course that can't just necessarily exist in a vacuum. We also need to be aware of the culture around us, but at the same time, the world is hard enough on women. And if you think, wow, my boobs look amazing, one day I'm going to show them off, the last thing you need is another woman tearing you down because you're having a good boob day. I'm sorry. And I think, do you know what I mean? I think this is something. And I was talking to Esme about this as well, where we have a social policing instinct, and whether you think it's an instinct or conditioning, whatever perspective you want to have, there's still this thing where instead of policing the world around us and going, oh, actually, that's a predator, be wary of him, so on and so on. We have something where we turn it in on ourselves, and I call it. Yeah, and I call it switchblade sistering, because I've seen it so often. And there was a movie, I think in the 70s, called Switchblade Sisters, about a girl gang who then went crazy and had switchblades, and they went crazy and slashed each other up because of a man. And I'm going, this is exactly the same thing we're doing in feminist circles, but the guy here is just an allegory for patriarchy. So the guy in the film is an allegory for patriarchy, and then we're just ripping at each other, and it's not going to be conducive to advancing. And not every single woman is going to want to get rid of adornment. Some are going to be ready to colour and joy in life, and it's okay to feel beautiful. And there's a difference as well, I think, between feeling beautiful and having an autonomous idea of what constitutes beauty versus the stereotypical reductive idea of what constitutes hot.
Yes.
Because at the moment, the current predatory beauty trends for what constitutes hot is essentially a woman looking like a about to cry 13-year-old girl. And I'm not exaggerating with that. So there's actually surgeons in China and South Korea who will make women look like 13-year-olds. So they'll take a woman in their mid-20s and then give her neotenous developing features to make her look like she's underage. And you have to question, and that's, you have to question where that comes from. That's going to be from pedo culture. That's going to be from pornography, because they, like, even with stuff like lip filler and breast enhancements and things like that, they originally came from experiments on prostitutes and also the pornography industry. And then they filtered down into the mainstream culture. And this is the next phase of that. So I'm not going to have a go at a woman who wants to have surgery. What I will do is say, well, it's personally not for me and here's why. And then it's up to her to make the decision, rather than you policing her and, saying, oh, you can't do that. You're not a feminist if you do that.
Right.
So there's, so first of all, there's that. Sorry, just to finish my point.
No, please do.
Sorry. So there's that, which is kind of, being sort of pushed and shoehorned into a reductive idea of what constitutes hot, and then the embodiment of beauty. So, for example, like, I don't know anyone else who really likes, the 80s idea of what constitutes beautiful generally around me, but I think it's gorgeous. Like, the trend at the moment is for a woman to not have an angular jawline, and I think angular jawlines on women look absolutely incredible. I love a good angular jawline. And just women looking strong and, just embodying that strength. To me, strength is beautiful. So if I can have my jawline looking a bit angular, if I can look strong, if I can walk into a room and have a presence, that to me is beautiful, because I am in my strengths. I'm not as a dolly bird for somebody,
Yes, exactly. Well, and I so speaking to the surgery thing, and I absolutely agree with you. It's not something that I am personally interested in. But I do just feel like there's such a place for us to just kind of step back and say, it's not for me to know what this woman's intention is. And I think of that in terms of the few people that I am intimately aware of, that I'm intimately engaged with in my life, that have had these operations, are breast cancer survivors. And
exactly.
And one of my friends actually is a woman who was born without one breast. And the amount of time spent agonizing about what other women would think of them based on the size of breasts they decided to get.
That's sad.
Yeah, and the guilt that they felt about the fact that they felt like they wanted or needed to have breasts at all. And also, trying to honor who they really were as a woman, and don't I get to be that? And, all of it's just such a complicated thing. And so I often try to just sort of pull away and hope that we can all be really oriented on the why. And I come back to that because even something as simple, for instance, I have a client who spent years as a runner, and she loved the body that she had. She did not love the running. She told herself she loved the running. She told me she loved the running. But she also talked about the fact that she loved it because when she was in bed with a man, he said, "You have such a great body." And then she had an accident and had a terrible fall and broke her leg very badly and wasn't able to run. And over the course of the year and a half window after that, in the healing process, she began to really appreciate her body as a vehicle, just sort of the rugged usefulness of it to get her around the world once she'd had all the surgeries and her legs finally worked, and it was that celebration of her body that actually brought her back to running, but because she loved the way it felt to push herself. She loved the way that her burned. She loved the way that her lungs burned, all of those kinds of things. And I had a similar kind of journey myself, feeling I loathed exercise because I felt like I was obligated to do it in order to be appealing to the boyfriend that I was desperately hoping to hang on to, who was actually a pile of shit. And, with the hindsight of real adulthood.
Well,
But, but at the time, that was like my big motivation. And as I developed into my own journey of embodiment and appreciation of myself, I began to love exercise in different ways and for different reasons. And because I loved the way it felt in my body, I loved the way I felt the day after. I loved the way I breathed really hard, or the adrenaline rush that I got from skiing really hard, or biking up the mountain, or whatever it was. And it completely changed the experience from one. The action is exactly the same, but the experience of it was completely different.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something really, really important there. And that's an incredible journey to go on. I mean, I can't imagine just what it would have been like to just lose your body, and that idea of just, being able to push yourself, and then just having to then, rehabilitate and learn gratitude in your own body. Like, first of all, that's an incredible journey. So that both of you have parallels here, but there's really a rich vein of kind of classical feminist discourse that you kind of tapped on, because a lot of the time, you've got the social policing instinct, which then pushes a lot of women who want to be part of the cause away. And secondly, it's to do with, there's a very big difference between something that's restorative, constructive, reparative. So, some cosmetic surgery was also created for people who, didn't have an eye, to have a prosthetic eye, and to have, a constructed orbital bone if they've lost it. So there is something to say about, like, say, for example, a woman suffered domestic violence, and now she's had loads and loads of sleepless nights, and now the trauma she's felt has got to her face, right? The classical radical argument would be, just love your body and the fact you've survived. But if she's looking in the mirror and all she's seeing is the fact this guy's managed to gain victory over her face, then actually, then, do you see what I mean? Like, then if she wants to have something about that. Yeah, if she wants to go and have some restorative, things done on her face, I'm not going to judge her for that, because what she wants to do is beautiful. You see what I mean? She wants to get over the trauma. And, the real key for that really is making sure the industry is very well regulated, understanding where the push for extreme aesthetics comes from, criticizing where the push for extreme aesthetics comes from, and exposing the root of those so everybody is aware, and then understanding where that occurs, making sure anyone who's operating as a cowboy surgeon is then brought to justice, and then making sure within that kind of more nurturing constructive framework, then you've got, decisions to make, because then if you realize where this stuff comes from, most of the people wouldn't make the decision to look ultra pornified, for example.
Yes, exactly.
Rather than going, if you're just a rad femme who's wearing, like, I don't know, jeans and a t-shirt, you're looking at a hyper pornified person who doesn't know that porn culture has got to them, and you're going, oh, what do you want to do that for? Like, she's not going to listen to you. She'll just be turned off. So, sure. Like, having that hostile, being aggressive and hostile to other women generally isn't sisterhood.
Right, exactly.
And then also, just, if you're looking at a woman like that and then all you're doing is judging her, rather than going, oh, actually, what pressures has she got that would have influenced her decision? Because she's been told that being pornified is empowering. She's been told that being pornified is somehow beneficial for her.
Right.
And it could be that she's had some kind of superficial benefits in male attention, and she's therefore equating that with success. And that's not necessarily the case. So, so there's all this kind of stuff. Rather than just policing the woman, it's about, like, so I take the approach of being tough on systems, kind on people. So I would always look at the system. So look at the system, dismantle those mechanisms, show people exactly where this stuff's come from and why. And then there you go. You have all the information, and now you can make an informed decision. Voila.
Yes, I love that. Well, and I love that so much, because you come to this from a systemic, beautiful frame, and my work, brings me to it from a very, like, individual sort of frame. But there's such a beautiful compliment there, because one of the things that I, in an attempt to break down that conditioning, which is systemic, I love the idea that women could be I would love to be able to empower women to explore what beauty really means, because it is not universal. It is not the same in the West as it is in, for instance, I'm in South America. And there's, similarities, of course, because we all live in a almost exclusively patriarchal, capitalistic dominated hierarchical world. But and also there are these little details that are wildly different that can be really empowering when we can say, you know what, actually, the giant nose that is so shamed in the States is celebrated, or the big curvy round peach behind, or whatever. I love the idea that we can redefine beauty on our own terms, and then whatever you want to do to make yourself feel the way that you want to feel in your body. Of course, I'm going to advocate that you love it the way that it is, because I don't love the idea of subliminally telling our bodies that they're not good enough the way they came into the world. But also in an effort to kind of hold that space. And I think too that, I am in no way excusing the individual men. The system I am pissed as hell at, fuck off. And I'm not excusing the individual men that have bought into it. I also want to acknowledge that they are also conditioned around what beautiful is. That because for how many centuries, big voluptuous women with belly rolls and back fat were the goddesses of artwork and sensuality and pleasure and wealth, abundance in all kinds of ways. So I think that there's a lot too that's been fed to them. I have a friend, I have to tell this story real quick. I have a friend who has always been incredibly self-conscious. She does not have a classically, Barbie doll shaped body. And I always thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. Anyway, she never believed that she was worthy of, she's a heterosexual. So she was looking for a man, and she didn't believe that she was worthy of a beautiful man. And eventually, a very attractive man had, been interested in her for a very long time and just not let her know that. They came together, began to, make their relationship the sensual version that those relationships are. And he told her several times that he loved the fact that she was soft. And he said that he had previous girlfriends. Yeah. He'd had previous girlfriends that had even been married to a woman that was very, very heavily sculpted, very, very kind of angular and brutally formed. And that was her intention. And she was also attractive. But for my friend, the curvy one, she, I think, felt such a sense of validation. And I don't love that she had to get it there, but I love that she got it, because he in that moment also acknowledged that he in fact talked about the fact that his father had said to him, you think you want a hard body girl, but the one that you really want is the one that's soft, the one that cuddles, the one that's mushy, squishy. And I loved that moment, just in highlighting the reality that there's this projection on us that all men want this certain kind of form or something, and we're also told, of course, that we're supposed to play into that, which is the first thing that I want to shut the fuck down. We don't have to play into anything. We are hard stop. I also think that we can embrace the hope and possibility and begin to adjust the perspective that men have on what beauty really is by embodying the beauty that we believe is inherent in us the way that we are. Round and curvy, flat and angular, toned, soft, squishy, whatever. There's beauty in all of it.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, because I mean there's lots of things there, and I think that's beautiful that she found someone who, loved her body, and that he was also able to, decondition and realize exactly what he wanted. Decondition. That's beautiful. Because you're right. That's when the predominant culture, we are told that kind of skinny, angular, impossibly young forever is meant to be what you're into, and then if you're not into that, then you're fetishized into cougar or something like that. So everything has to be kind of broken down and commodified into a fetish. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah. So definitely that. There are some, like, so in terms of So in terms of basic evolutionary success, there are things like indicators of health, like lots of different evolutionary reasons why people like different things. Because also there's a thing called histocompatibility. So if your immune systems are compatible, if the woman's slightly, if the woman's slightly curvier or slightly skinnier, and then you have a compatible immune system, that means your babies are going to be stronger and you're going to be really attracted to that person. And so there's a whole bunch of things as well that that basically defines attractiveness, and we're never going to be devoid from our environments, because it's a mixture of biology and our environment and the society that shapes it. But it's always worth questioning it, examining it, and also what your body feels healthy as. So there was, if you look at the in the Winter Olympics, there was a skater that won gold, Alyssa, her surname escapes me now, but she was in her joy because prior to all of this, she was forced to restrict. She was forced to practice when she didn't want to. She was forced into this and ended up having, a real breakdown moment. And then she returned to the Winter Olympics, was in her joy, and she said, well, I'm in my joy. No one is going to tell me when to train. I'm going to set my own training schedule. No one is going to tell me what to eat. I'm going to eat what I like and I wear what I like. And she took gold.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, come on. Yes. That's freaking amazing.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And you could tell this woman does not restrict. She doesn't punish her body, that she is in her joy, and she was healthy, happy, and individually expressive. That is the apex of what we can aim for. If an Olympic athlete can be in her joy and healthy and embodied and not in a punishing and restrictive regime. And she's like literally now, like literally a gold medal winning athlete. I mean, come on, that's just that's the base plate where you could go, oh right, no, I can actually embody, and I can go towards what I like, and I can honor my body, and I can work with it rather than against it, because that's what she's done, and she's come out on top. That's brilliant. And and I think
I love that so much.
Yeah, and we need more examples of that in the culture, and we need to, I think, as women, if we can push these examples into predominant culture, talk about them. She's been all over the internet now. She's everywhere. About what looks attractive to you or so on. People will look at potentially the toxic elements of the body positivity movement, where you had fat influencers dying, for example. So they were called fat positivity influence, and a few of them have died now. And there's a very big difference, but I know, which is really sad. And there's a very big difference between having that healthy embodiment, and then I think the body positivity movement ended up being algorithmically pushed to the extreme. So and so people were pushed basically through these algorithms, usually designed by men, into these echo chambers, which means you become more and more extreme, and you are then self-reinforced. And actually those echo chambers can be really toxic. And so it's really important to think about what is actually making your body feel good. How and that goes back to embodiment and being grounded. Because if you're only engaging in, and I'm not, against, people being, positive if they're, if they're larger, for example. Of course, you have every right to do that and every right to be embodied. Every woman does. But if it has got to the point where, these influences are dying, that's not honoring your body. That's the antithesis of honoring your body. So I think the more embodied practice we have, the more we ground ourselves, the more we think about kind of what makes us feel good, move in a way that makes us feel good and grounded, and we listen to ourselves more, we are going to be in a better position where we're able to be more autonomously focused and able to honor what we actually want and to feel beautiful within ourselves,
Yes, absolutely. I agree completely. And I think that's one of those the key foundations, though, the whole point really of embodiment is to be in your body and know it so well that you know what it needs, how it feels. If I have a friend who quit drinking, she was, not a big drinker by any means, but she just decided, in her mid-20s or something to quit. And she got really healthy. She wanted to run marathons and she was doing those things. And we were all so proud of her. I still am. She still is. But she talked to me at one point about, having gotten so clean that even when she ate too much salt, she felt the difference the next day. Like she said, screw drinking. So like I never want to feel hungover again, because now I know what it feels like if I have too much salt in my diet. And there's a version of that's limiting and extreme, and exactly what we were, speaking about as perhaps not super supportive in the context of the Olympian and so on. But to be able to make the choices that you make for your body, because you are tuned into the way that it really feels and what it really needs, and how the stuff that you're putting in it, the things that you're doing to it, the way that you're adorning it, whatever feels to you, I think is the kind of crux of what being embodied means, and that then spreads out throughout our lives. It's so much easier to make a choice about what's right in the greater context of your life when you've been making choices about what's right for you in terms of your time, in terms of your energy, in terms of what you put in your body, in terms of the way that you walk out of your house, whatever. I think that embodiment, it carries out the empowerment of it, and the ability to be self-oriented carries out into our lives in a way that will genuinely help to change communities, whatever, out into the whole world. I am a little reticent to say it'll change the world, but you know what I mean? The impact radiates.
No, I totally do. And I think there is just something so wonderful about being around someone who is grounded and present. And you can, you can feel the energy in the room when there's someone, like, it's, we're social creatures. So if you're around someone who's embodied, that's going to help you also potentially feel embodied as well. And you feel that, because I remember, when I was very new to the body painting scene, because I've been a body painter forever now, and I work with women who have suffered, sexual violence, domestic violence, coercive control, and I use body painting in an autonomy-focused practice as a way of them getting control over their bodies. And I love that. Yeah, I honestly, it's the best work I've ever done in my life.
It's incredible.
And thank you. And so in terms of being a body painter, I've noticed the change in these women when I work in this particular way, and they also get to have as much or as little of their body painted as they like. So this isn't you have to be naked. They choose. From the word go, they choose everything. And I will, even when I make a body paint sketch for them, they have a right to say no or change anything, and all that sort of thing, and focus practice. So I've met other body painters, and some of them are sexist assholes because they're dickhead men, and that you're never going to get rid of those. You can keep them out of your life though, and also call them out when they do anything untoward.
Yes.
Which because I'm not dealing with any of that crap. And
no.
But I remember speaking to another female body painter, and she was quite a bit older than me. And but I remember when I met her, she had this aura of being the most grounded, present, unfuckwithable woman I'd ever met in my life.
Oh, I love that.
Her aura was like the size of a building, and I was just like, wow, who is this woman? And you can just feel it when someone is that level of embodied. And she just people would just make way for her in the street. I think she was about 60 years old or something, but people would just make way for her in the street because of the way she carried herself. She didn't shy away.
Beautiful. Yes.
I was just so enamored with this woman. It was incredible. I was like, wow, oh my God. And that just showed to me how embodied you could actually be. And that's been kind of my subconscious template to work towards ever since I met this woman, because she just had such a lasting impression. It's like, if we can get more women embodied like that, actually taking up space, really being autonomously focused, doing what they want to do with their life, then how many more women are going to have this as a subconscious template to be the antithesis of full work,
Oh, I do too. I absolutely do. And I love the idea that, I feel like painting with really broad strokes here and in a very judgmental, way, I'm going to honor that. But I get the sense that the male dominated capitalistic patriarchal energy in general is so ego driven, and not even just like the ego feeding the individual, but rather this like presentation to the outside world that's yes, where the value is entirely derived from what the outside world perceives of the individuals that are, participating in that energy or mentality. And if we can reorient so that women have all of this huge energy and value and authority and empowerment coming from within, who don't give a fuck about how it's perceived by the outside world, I genuinely feel like that power is both so much more authentic, so much bigger, and so much less fragile, so much more deeply rooted, that we can like sort of metaphorically crowd out the patriarchal, label oriented, the intensely dominant, hierarchical, oppressive, this is how and who you should be feeling, because the embodied thing is so much freer. But before I'm sorry, I just want to I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your work, because I wanted to cycle back to that several times now. And I would love to, can you share an experience of like with a particular client, how the painting helped to sort of facilitate or breed or highlight that energy for them?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So I worked with a woman. I went up to Scotland to work with a woman who has blood cancer, and because she couldn't make it down to the studio, so I came to her for this project. So the project is called Painted Powerful, My Body Is Mine, and it's an ongoing project. It's going to culminate in a book and a documentary, but it's a lot slower than I thought it would be, and I think that's actually a good thing. Well, I think it's a good thing because I had a schedule for this, and actually, as it grows and the practice develops, it actually needs proper room to breathe, and it needs the right women involved. And so, because I obviously know, body art as a therapeutic practice or an autonomy focused practice is not going to be the domain for every single woman who suffered domestic violence. It never will be, but it's for a particular type of woman who does enjoy that adornment. And it's about finding the right people and making sure that you have a rapport where you're able to work and there's mutual trust and so on. And that's really, I don't often use that word, but I think that's a really sacred bond to have. Yeah. Where, you have that trust, and you're also there because I'm also, I'm a survivor of very severe domestic and sexual violence. I don't, it's been a rock and roll life. One day I'll write a book and absolutely nobody will believe it because it's so mental. Like one day, well, it'll be called By the Skin of My Teeth or something like that, but it's just crazy, man. What a life. But, so as a survivor, I want to be able to make sure the space I create for them is contained, that they have everything they need, that if they do have any issues or any flashbacks, that I'm able to ground them. So, I got trained in those exercises. So far, I've not had a single incident with every single woman I've painted. Beautiful. It's wonderful. I've never had a negative experience, and that's brilliant. So, and as based on my feedback, I've had a 100% positive feedback on women feeling better after they've been painted. So I know this works. I know this works, and it works for the people, for the women who need this. So I went up to Scotland, and she wanted to be kind of painted as a sort of almost Galadriel inspired, but kind of a dark warrior-esque woman who is very unfuckwithable, very look upon me in despair. She wanted something really strong. So I did the concept, gave it to her, and she only had her face, neck, décolletage, and arms painted. So she basically set where she wanted to get painted, and it was beautiful because I didn't know that she was a dancer. She hadn't told me this about her story. And when we got to the photo shoot, because I had a mobile studio that I set up in her living room and things like that. So it meant she didn't have to go anywhere and we could save her energy. Suddenly came out and she came alive in front of the camera. It was stunning. And she'd almost forgotten that part of her even existed after this incident happened. And the testimonial I got from her, I then so I presented this at the Royal College of Psychiatrists a couple of years back, and the testimonial was, I didn't feel ashamed. And she said that, and every single, oh my God, sorry, every single time, every single time I think about her story, it's one of the most moving ones I've ever had, because the fact that she couldn't even look at herself, she couldn't look at the pictures of herself after this happened, and now she's got pictures of her all and that to me was such an incredible transformation. The fact that she's now able to look at herself, that she didn't feel ashamed, because that shame that it's like Giselle Pellico says, shame must change sides. And the fact that, through that work I was doing with her, I was able to get rid of that shame for her, or help her access a way of getting rid of that shame, was just so powerful. And I think as well, with a lot of the feminist work that we do when we're tackling male violence, a lot of the time, I think, a lot of women who've experienced trauma, who may need something different in order to heal, they kind of end up being cannon fodder for the movement, because they're already traumatized. They come in, they give their all, and if they react out of trauma, women will just shut them out. And I don't want that for any woman who's experienced sexual violence. I want there to be a way. Yeah, exactly. And I want there to be a way for for women to thrive afterwards. And I think there's a real, I hate to say it, but in some more kind of high profile areas of contemporary radical feminism, anyone who's doing restorative or reparative work tends to get looked down on and sneered at. And actually making sure women are actually better and able to be healed in some way, or having some kind of positive healing effect, that is part of the fucking work, helping them be embodied and spreading some of that creative joy. And the reason I use body paint is because it's the oldest canvas we have as human beings. Body art is 500,000 years old. It doesn't belong to either sex. It belongs to us. And if the only way you can think about it is through pornification, then it means you're allowing patriarchy to take away 500,000 years worth of our work. And I'm not having it. It belongs to us.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, and I just want to briefly celebrate what I'm imagining to be another aspect of your work. You're making about the need for healing is also about reclamation, or at least it was for me. About taking back my ability to be sexual in my life and with my partner, but in my body, my ability to feel pleasure and joy in my body, my ability for my body to be a sensory organ in the world. And for that to be safe again, something that I got to enjoy experiencing being in my body again. And the work that you're doing and the care with which you're approaching that element of the recovery process is just so essential, because we need the reclamation is part of winning the war. The reclamation is part of disempowering the oppressors and the abusers. It's part of re-empowering everyone, and particularly the victims.
Yes, you're completely right. Because the thing is, if you break a woman down and you just leave her broken, it's very easy for an abuser to pick that woman up again and then re-abuse her and re-traumatize her.
Absolutely.
We know this from the literature, that a woman who has been abused is more likely to be abused later on. And if you can stop that process in its tracks through a bit of reclamation, that is essential work, because you could prevent a woman from being abused again in the future. If she understands what her body feels like, if she understands what danger feels like, if she understands what joy actually feels like, as a comparison to all the pain she's been experiencing, you've now given her the equipment to realize when something feels wrong.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the deep knowledge of her worthiness to be protected by herself, by the people around her, by her feminine community, whatever her mechanisms and organizations and support systems are. But if you leave her broken, she doesn't even, there's not even a worthiness, there's not even an element of worthiness of that protection or support. There's often not even the ability to speak out and say, I need protection and support. I need rehabilitation. I need.
And when I presented this, this previously, I had women coming up to me saying, oh, actually, I think I'd want to try that. And so it was women of all types. So it was like, women in their 30s, women in their 60s, women of all ages and so on. And if you just even present that and open it up to them, and then they want to be a part of that, then, you've already kind of helped open the door for them to start seeing themselves differently and to want to go toward that experience. And just having that option there is radical.
Yeah,
and I feel like body art is the most like punk rock thing in the history of ever, because it's the brush paints in you and no one can tell you what to do with your body. Like, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. Like, your body is your own and you can do what you want with it. And the other thing as well, the beauty about body paint is that it washes off. It's not like a tattoo. It's not like a permanent piercing or anything like that, which would be, potentially in some tribes, for example, a rite of passage would be kind of tattoos, piercings, branding, so on. This is something where there's no pain involved. There's no suffering involved. There's literally just, there's being painted, having a conversation, having some food. Like, the food is geared to what people, what a woman would like. The music is geared to what a woman would like. If they preferred lectures on, they can have lectures. If they want to chat, they can chat. Nurturing and autonomy focused a space as possible.
That's so beautiful.
And because the thing is, a lot of the time, these women too, they haven't had nurturance or care in their life sometimes, or they've experienced a lot of pain and suffering and they can't quite remember what that feels like. And so providing that space is actually really important, because then, again, it goes back into the subconscious blueprint. It's like, oh, this is what it feels like when I'm being taken care of. This is what it feels like when I have my needs catered to. This is what it feels like to be safe. And then they can go out with that blueprint to get out of their old ways of being. And if you get out of your skin and into something else for a while, I mean, that's a real way to break away from the norm, and to bring something inside out. So there was another woman I painted a while ago. She left her partner and she wanted a change of skin after she left her partner. And so I painted her as this roaring phoenix rising up from the ashes. And she started off, we were like talking. She was a little bit nervous, but was really excited. And we were kind of talking and stuff. And I mean, I really bouged this whole thing up. So she had gold leaf in her hair and jewels and everything. And it was really like, I went to town, right? So, and it, we were talking like for ages. Like, it took us longer than I thought it would, because we were just talking so much. It was great. And at the end, when we had time to do the photo shoot, she said, oh, can I try something? I said, absolutely. And suddenly this, body language of this roaring phoenix kind of came out, and she was outstretching her arms and she was looking straight at the camera, and she felt really kind of brave in herself and, felt grounded. And so you even see the body language changing as the person gets painted, changing in the mirror. It changes how you hold yourself. It changes how you feel. And it goes from, oh, I think my thighs are wobbly, to, oh my God, I have a phoenix on my thighs. This is amazing. And do you know what I mean? It's like, and it reframes how you relate to your body. And there's a real excitement there as well, because there's a novelty value. So, you don't often see someone body painted to go to the shops, do you? It's a experience. So it's also a way of breaking the routines you can have in your head where you think about yourself in a particular way. So there was another woman I painted, Genevieve, who she said, I want to be a cryptid that a man would regret meeting in the woods at night. And so was, saying why she wanted this, and, the fact that she'd, experienced, domestic violence and so on. And at the end, so it went from kind of quite base level matter of fact where she was doing the interview, to at the end, because I do interviews before and after to see kind of the transformation, and then I follow up with them like a few months afterwards. And some of them I'm still talking to, still friends with. And she was like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever done in my life. I think more people should do this. And she was just so happy, joyful. And there's no obligation for that to happen. I tell them there's no obligation for that to happen, but it always seems to go that way. And I think that's because as well, I really, I want them to be able to experience joy. And I just said it in the previous podcast I did with Esme, but joy is a feminist issue.
Yes.
If you can't have joy in your life, then, what's the bloody point?
Well, yeah, exactly. Not to mention the fact that patriarchy and the oppressive systems of any kind thrive on people being unhappy. They thrive on people separated and depressed and wallowing and, all of the things. Joy is and community are the antithesis and the medicine in many ways to take down those, such damaging oppressive systems that we've been living under forever.
Oh, totally. And the thing is, if you are miserable, then if you're in a capitalist system, they can sell you a solution.
Exactly. And because you're never content, you're always seeking outside of yourself, which is the place where they can take the power of validation that you desperately want, but they won't give you to keep you in the cycle. It's just, there's a million layers of it. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's the same as well with social media algorithms. So they give you a bit of a dopamine.
Yes.
It's basically wired like a casino now. So they give you a bit of dopamine, and it's like intermittent rewards. Like you can skin a box pigeons to react to intermittent rewards. Like it's very base brain,
Yes.
So you've got all of these different algorithms that will give you fleeting validation if you post something for the gram or post something on Twitter or post something on Facebook or whatever, or TikTok or Snapchat, but then that validation is fleeting. And because you've had, because dopamine is the anticipation of the reward as well. So it's seeking and roving behavior as well. And that's why people doom scroll so much, because they're basically plugged into their dopamine supply and they're just draining their dopamine through doom scrolling to all space.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. The social media element of all of it is that there's that, artificial sense of being connected because it's sort of the voyeur version. So you've got this kind of almost holographic reality in which you are engaging with other people, or you do have a community around you or whatever, but it isn't real. And it isn't actually feeding you, at least not on a deeper level, the way that we would, really need to be fed in order to be productive community members and in order to band together and protect each other and support each other and lift each other up rather than divide and tear each other down. It's just, it's literally built in every aspect of its construction, literally through technology and like the algorithmic element of it, to keep us bought in to the fact that we need that system. The fact that we need that version of the reality. Yep, exactly.
Yep. And you're right. I mean, there's the counter argument, which is people who are a little, scared about going outside, people who are autistic, that, like, for example, like early Facebook was about connection, and it's anathema to connection. So it's more about advertising, algorithmic pushes, pushing content, and then it takes 5 or 10 scrolls for you to find exactly what your friend's been up to, and actually the post is 3 months out of stage. Like it's just not. It's anathema to communication now. So where we could have had tools for connection, they've gone, we could monetize this and keep people
exactly.
It's like, for fuck's sake.
It's always all about the money. Always all about the money.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right in the fact that, real life community can be the antithesis to that. And you need that people around you as much as you can have, because, community is, I think is what we've become very fragmented. I've seen this with UK history, especially when there used to be kind of council housing, which then was turned from houses to flats, and it went from a community to being isolated in a small home where you don't know anybody on your floor, to then having some social housing, to then social cleansing when people were then, so in 2010, when austerity measures, 2012, I think austerity measures started, there was a lot of social cleansing in London where they forced the poor people out and forced them out of their homes, and no one did anything about it. And I'm there going, right, so that's, well, thanks, Labour. What good, right? And so these communities, like people who really need a community, so the elderly, people who may have had, behavioral problems and so on, who would have desperately needed community, they were all forced out, and they had further fragmentation. So the people who really needed community the most were then kind of increasingly from like the 60s onwards, were kind of like broken up and broken up and broken up. And and I'm like, oh, I wonder why you're getting loads of problems with people being antisocial now.
Right.
What you've done to them. And then
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and how are you meant to be embodied when there's no places for you to be embodied? So there's no social clubs, there's no groups, there's like literally nothing because of austerity measures. There's nothing there, especially for like young women. They've got Instagram, maybe. If that,
maybe.
Possibly.
And only if they show up in a certain way and then promote it to the, male. Yeah.
Exactly.
When we were talking earlier about just the safe space that's created by someone who is wildly embodied, when you are and you can find your community, that is such a deeply cathartic, supportive, protected, and that's something that we're never going to get to if we're constantly being separated from who we really are, why we're really making the choices that we are, the kinds of lives and people that we really want to live and be. We're, that much more participatory.
No, you're totally right. And I think the way you're coming at it from like an individual perspective where you want women to be grounded, I think that sows the seed for them then finding a community of embodied.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
we need so much more of that. And I think, if you look at kind of matriarchal areas of the world, they have that by default. The women are community by default. Even bonobos, they have they do female alliances by default.
Yes.
And we're equidistant between chimps and bonobos. It's not like we're the antithesis of bonobos. It's
right.
It's ridiculous, really, that people think that women aren't supposed to have like communities and bond, and that we're just meant to be atomized. It's just not true. And I think this is also why I think as well, if you look at some kind of lesbians, and I think from the 70s to about the 90s, there was a lot of push for kind of lesbian communal living. And I can understand why, because if you're kind of having a feminist awakening and you can't find anybody else and you want to be a part of something, then who are you going to live with? And you're going to live with people who are going to share your same value systems. And, there were some very good parts to that and some not so good parts to that. But some people really were flourishing within communal living in that respect. And I do wonder if in the future, if we're going to have kind of more matriarchal communities where, like genuinely matriarchal communities where women can actually connect and not experience things like domestic violence and things like that. And I there's a few projects in the world at the moment, but I think we need some embodied women to make more of them.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. It's safe for them to be seen and witnessed stepping into that space.
I think I'm going to call it trad rad femme. I think this is where some of the trad rad femme argument falls down, because they think de facto that if you want to be big, bold and bright sometimes, and not everyone, like I do know some like amazing kind of like hippie style rad femmes who really get it, like the Greenham women I know are freaking awesome. I've met some amazing ones that get it, but for the ones that don't, like I don't think they necessarily realize that there is a real power in going out, having this, being brightly coloured and painted. And the current culture, there's a trend towards grey and a trend towards beige. So all the trees are becoming grey, all of the houses are becoming grey and beige, and there was a colour trend called millennial grey. So all the colour and the joy and the life is very slowly being engineered out of life, because instead of, like, for example, a home being a home and a car being a car, they're now appreciating assets. And so they're meant to be as neutral as possible, so you can then trade them rather than you having as vehicles of individual expression.
Self-expression,
exactly. And so you have this problem with everything becoming grey and beige and boring, and this is an antidote to that, at least temporarily, where you're able to go out and have a little burst of colour, or be a little burst of colour and joy in a place where the world just wants you to be grey and beige and boring. And just with people who are anti kind of all quote unquote queer spaces, I don't think they realize that not every single person who identifies as queer is a predator, for one.
Right, exactly.
And the people who are predatory need to be dealt with and essentially be brought to justice. Like there was one, I think it was Stephen Ireland, who set up a really predatory organization, and then he's been dealt with now, thankfully.
Thank God.
But the thing is, right, psychologically, what do they think people are getting out of these spaces? You get to cover yourself in glitter. You get to dance. You get to experience joy. you get to experiment, and so there's all of these wonderful things which, shouldn't be codified as anyone who wants to do this is somehow wrong or predatory. These are inherent to us as a species, to want to experiment, to want to play, to sometimes want to cover yourself in glitter should you fancy.
Exactly.
These are not bad things. These are actually really important to us. And there's a drive at the moment which is towards the more aesthetically conservative and the more conventional, and for the creative kids, for the weird kids, for the autistic kids, for the odd kids, for women and men who just don't want a boring life, and there's more of them out there than people believe, then where do you think they're going to go?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, come on.
Exactly. And the act of creation and self-expression is so essential to our wellness, our mental health, not to mention, the spiritual things that may go along with that for the people that align that way. Again, separating ourselves from that is just making us more and more and more a human version of the robot that participates in the system, that makes the system wealthy and the robot dead, like emotionally and literally. So I feel like creative self-expression and color literally are life-saving forces and system ways to break out of the system.
Yes, and 3 things there actually have just brought to mind. First of all, in terms of a robot in a system, there was a robot that was working, I believe, in an Amazon warehouse that was on its legs for 12 hours and then keeled over and stopped working. So hello, allegory. I know. Secondly, there was actually a study on eccentricity and self-esteem. And if you benevolently break social rules in an odd way, it's actually really good for your self-esteem and good for the self-esteem of other people around you. And then also, we've got some really interesting studies out there where if you do an artistic or creative practice, you are more likely to live longer. So we have all of this evidence that it's really good for you to be actually embodied and self-directed and actually create things. We're here as, humans are creative by default. That's how we reproduce. And we reproduce through genes, and we reproduce through ideas or memes. And so if you are creating something and you're then able to share that with the world, then that's one of the reasons we're here. All the time, all day, especially right now. Because it's okay to create, it's okay to want to do creative, wonderful, artsy, joyous things. And I said, oh God, it was a good couple of years ago now, but in an interview I said, well, in every war there's at least one morale officer. So, and we're basically in a war for women's bodies and our lives and our freedoms. You're going to morale officers, sorry about it. You're going to need people who are colorful and joyful, who can help you get out of your skin and into something else, who can help you actually survive. And that's what we're here for.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you for that. I'm gonna carry that imagery around in my pocket for a while.
Is there, before we wrap up this incredible conversation where you've been an absolute delight, and I'm so excited to be Medusa Rising, and I can't wait to carry on working with you. Is there anything oh, thank you. Is there anything you would like to say before we wrap up?
Well, honestly, that was just it, is thank you. You are personally, as a human, just an inspiration to me in so many ways. I am absolutely a massive fan right off the bat. And it's because there's such an authenticity in everything that you do and in the intention behind it. And I think that's just so beautiful and healing, and creates such a safe space that I'm so honored to be walking through that with you. Thank you a million times. And to Medusa Rising in general, as an organization, and Esme for embracing me as well. I could not be more honored and excited, genuinely ecstatic level excited.
This. Oh, that's so wonderful. And I feel the same way about you. There is such a joy to you. And I feel so lucky to be working with you. And just, what you're doing is just brilliant. And the fact you're helping women self-actualize. And I can tell you're in your groove.
Thank you.
Living your best life. And it's a joy to hear it, actually, especially in a world which just wants you kind of, beige and boring. So just thank you for being you and for being ferocious and fabulous. Okay. So with that joyous finish, I will say goodbye for now. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this Medusa Rising episode on embodiment. And if you would like some more on this series, then please just vote with your clicks and comments and tell us you'd like some more, because I'm pretty sure we could talk forever on this topic, actually.
Agreed.
I think it's brilliant.
Thank you, cousins, sisters, fellow travelers, for the gift of your attention. Your life energy is as precious to us as ours, especially in these apocalyptimistic times. Stay rad, stay witchy, ward each other well, because it feels like a good time to look after each other. Okay, catch you next time.